October 31st, 1978, 11:38 at night, St. Louis Union Station. A single train idles on the platform beneath the largest train shed ever built in the United States, the Inter-American. Northbound to Chicago, the last train to depart this building. Nobody standing on that platform knew it was the last one. There were no ceremonies, no speeches from anyone who had planned to be there, no photographer dispatched to record the moment. The train cleared the shed, the platform lights went out behind it, and 48 years of silence began at 1820 Market Street. The station that had handled 100,000 passengers in a single day during World War II. The station where Harry Truman held up a newspaper headline that the entire country still recognizes. The station that 22 railroads once called their western terminus, closed with a departure time stamped in an operations log and nothing more. On July 19th, 2026, something arrives at that address for the first time since that night. If you are within driving distance of St. Louis and you have not made a decision about this stop, this video is the decision. American Iron Works has been covering Big Boy number 4014's Eastern Tour as it moves east for the first time since 1941. Subscribe and hit the bell now so you get every stop as it happens. The Terminal Railroad Association of St. Louis formed in 1889. 7 railroad companies, each running its own separate operation, pooled resources to solve a problem that was costing all of them money. Every major line serving St. Louis ran from its own individual station. A passenger connecting between railroads had to cross the city on foot or by carriage. Freight interchange required moving rail cars between disconnected yards, miles apart. St. Louis sat at the geographic center of American rail commerce, the dividing line between east and west for freight shipments crossing the continent. Grain from the Midwest, coal from the Appalachian fields, manufactured goods from the industrial corridors of Ohio and Pennsylvania, every ton of it passed through or around this city. 13 major lines approached from the east, the Pennsylvania, the New York Central, the Baltimore and Ohio, the Nickel Plate, the Burlington, the Illinois Central among them. 9 came from the west, the Missouri Pacific, the Frisco, the Rock Island, the Wabash. Every one of those roads had to hand off its traffic at the city limits and then absorb the cost of car routing, interchange paperwork, and the delay of moving freight between stations that could not talk to each other. Shippers who needed freight moved from a Pennsylvania Railroad car to a Missouri Pacific car faced delays of days, not hours. Each car had to be physically moved between yards, logged by 2 separate railroad accounting systems, and cleared for departure under 2 separate scheduling operations. The hidden cost of that fragmentation ran into the tens of thousands of dollars per day across the combined network. No single railroad could fix it alone, because no single railroad owned all the pieces. The Terminal Railroad Association was the fix, a shared terminal system co-owned by the proprietary lines, operated as a single unified infrastructure that collapsed the entire interchange sequence into one transaction under one roof. The agreement was orchestrated by Jay Gould, the financier whose railroad consolidations defined the Gilded Age. What that agreement produced 5 years later was a building commission. A closed design competition among 10 invited architects. Theodore C. Link won it. Link was German-born, trained at the École Centrale in Paris, and had worked for American railroads, including the Atlantic and Pacific Railroad, before switching to architecture. He understood what a terminal station had to do from both sides of the transaction. His winning design drew from the walled medieval city of Carcassonne in southern France, a gateway built for permanence, built to control the movement of people and goods between territories. George H. Pegram took responsibility for the train shed. Pegram was a structural engineer who had developed a patented truss design, the Pegram truss, that had never been deployed at this scale. His brief was to cover 32 tracks under a single continuous roof, without interior columns blocking the operating floor. Construction on the train shed began July 7, 1892. It was completed in November 1893. The dimensions were 700 feet long, 606 feet wide, and 74 feet high. 378,000 square feet were under one continuous arch. That is the equivalent of 8 football fields. 32 tracks lay beneath it. There were 19 miles of internal track line, 130 switches, and 103 signals. When the station opened September 1, 1894, the train shed was the largest single roof span on Earth. The head house held a hotel, ticket offices, a Fred Harvey Company dining room staffed by the Harvey girls, and a grand hall with a 65-foot barrel-vaulted ceiling trimmed in gold leaf and stained glass. The 2-ton wrought-iron chandelier in the grand hall held 350 light bulbs. It was one of the first buildings in St. Louis to use electric light decoratively. The clock tower rose 230 feet and became the city's most visible landmark until the Gateway Arch arrived 7 decades later. 20,000 people attended the opening. William Taussig, the Terminal Railroad Association's president, gave the dedication speech. He said the building was intended to reflect the dignity, the commercial greatness, and the boundless future of the city. He was right about the engineering. The future he was describing had an end date nobody in that room could see yet. The station immediately became what it was designed to be. In 1903, the Terminal Railroad Association expanded the shed by another 180 feet to prepare for the 20 million visitors expected at the 1904 St. Louis World's Fair. They added an umbrella-type canopy structure along 20th Street, extending the platform reach without disturbing the symmetry of Pegram's original arch. The station absorbed 20 million visitors over a single fair season and resumed normal operations. That was the test it was built to pass. By the 1920s, it processed more than 140 arrivals and departures per day. The station reached its absolute ceiling during World War II. 300 trains per day. 100,000 passengers moving through a single building on the busiest days. December 22, 1945 was the single busiest day in the station's history. The war had ended. Soldiers were coming home from both theaters simultaneously. Trains pulling in from all directions, every platform occupied, every waiting area past capacity. Lines extended out to Market Street. The Midway, running the full 606-foot length from the head house to the tracks, held a full crowd from morning until midnight. For men who had been away for 2 or 3 years, St. Louis Union Station was the first American building they walked through after stepping off a ship in New York and boarding a train west. A soldier arriving from Europe in late 1945 rode the rails for 24 hours or more before Union Station appeared outside the window. When he stepped onto that platform, he was inside the largest enclosed structure in the American rail system, surrounded by thousands of other men doing the same thing, in a building that had been designed and built to receive exactly this volume of human movement. The 2-ton Grand Hall chandelier had been removed in the early 1940s, the iron and copper donated to the war effort. The building had contributed what it could to the machines that were now bringing these men home. On November 4, 1948, President Harry Truman's train stopped here on the return trip to Washington after his election upset. Truman stepped to the rear platform of his railcar, the Ferdinand Magellan. Someone handed him a copy of the Chicago Tribune with the front page headline, "Dewey defeats Truman." He held it up. Multiple photographers standing on this platform got the shot. That image, one of the most reproduced political photographs of the 20th century, was taken at St. Louis Union Station. 30 years later, on the same platform, the last Amtrak train cleared the shed at 11:38 p.m. with nobody there to document it. The mechanism of decline was not a single decision. The Federal Aid Highway Act of 1956 established the interstate highway system and created the Highway Trust Fund, a dedicated revenue mechanism directing federal gasoline tax dollars exclusively to road construction. Passenger rail received no comparable federal infrastructure commitment. Commercial aviation expanded through the same decade. By 1961, 16 years after the station's all-time peak, Union Station was converting its own track infrastructure to parking lots. The stub-end tracks George Pegram engineered for 32 simultaneous arrivals were being paved over for automobiles. When Amtrak took over national passenger service in May 1971, Union Station had 3 trains per day. By 1976, the count was 6. 6 trains per day in a building engineered for 300. The terminal that Jay Gould's agreement built to capture the interchange value of 22 railroads closed because 6 trains per day could not pay the operating costs of a 20-acre facility. On October 31, 1978, Amtrak abandoned Union Station. The trains shifted 1 block east. The Inter-American cleared the main shed at 11:38 p.m., and the station that opened as the largest terminal in the world closed without ceremony. For the next 7 years, the building sat vacant. In 1981, John Carpenter filmed portions of Escape from New York inside the empty structure. The Grand Hall that Tausig dedicated in 1894 hosted a staged gladiatorial fight. The building where 1 million soldiers came home in 1945 ran as a film set for a dystopian action movie a decade after its last train. In August 1985, after a $150 million renovation, the largest adaptive reuse project in the United States at the time, Union Station reopened as a hotel, shopping mall, and entertainment complex. The aquarium opened in 2019 where the boarding gates once stood. A 200-foot Ferris wheel operates in what was the station's freight handling area. The train shed George Pegram built for 32 operating tracks has 4 tracks today, used for excursion service only. The building survived. Its original function did not. That function returns for 6 hours on July 19th. Now the machine. Union Pacific number 4014 is a 4884 articulated steam locomotive. 4 lead wheels, 8 driving wheels on the front engine set, 8 more on the rear engine set, and 4 trailing wheels. 24 wheels total across a frame that bends in the middle. At 132 feet and 9 inches end to end, a rigid frame cannot negotiate a standard curve radius. The articulation joint between the 2 engine sets is not a structural compromise. It is the defining engineering feature that made this machine possible at this size. Total weight with the tender is 1.2 million pounds. Maximum horsepower at the drawbar is 6,290. Steam pressure at the boiler is 300 pounds per square inch. The boiler shell is 1 3/8 inches thick, made of rolled steel. 25 of these machines were built at the American Locomotive Company in Schenectady, New York, between 1941 and 1944. Every one of them was built to a single operating requirement: haul a 3,600-ton loaded freight train over the Wasatch Range between Ogden, Utah, and Cheyenne, Wyoming, without a helper locomotive on the grade. Before these machines existed, Union Pacific ran 2 locomotives on every heavy Wasatch assignment, 1 at the head end, 1 pushing from the rear. Double power meant double crew, double maintenance, and a hard cap on the speed of every loaded manifest on that division. Every departure required coordination between 2 separate crews, 2 mechanical inspections, and 2 sets of equipment that had to stay synchronized through grades, gaining 1,000 feet of elevation over 50 miles. The operating cost of that system, run over millions of ton-miles across the Wasatch, was the problem Otto Jabelmann was told to solve. Jabelmann was head of Union Pacific's Department of Research and Mechanical Standards. His answer was a single machine powerful enough to make the second locomotive unnecessary entirely. Alco completed the design and had the first machine running under power in 6 months. On September 4, 1941, number 4000 was delivered to Union Pacific in Omaha. Number 4014 followed in December. During construction at Schenectady, an anonymous Alco worker chalked 2 words on the smoke box of one of the first machines, the blunt circular face at the front of the boiler: Big Boy. Nobody erased them. The official class designation was Wasatches, after the mountain range. The chalk won. Number 4014 entered revenue service December 1941. The same week, the United States declared war on Japan. These machines went directly into wartime service, moving military equipment, raw materials, and fuel across the Wasatch. In regular service, train weights of 4,200 tons, 17% above the design specification, were documented. On April 2, 1943, number 4014 pulled 65 loaded freight cars between Ogden and Evanston, Wyoming, and peaked at 5,530 horsepower, a test figure that appeared in almost no public documentation for decades afterward. Revenue service continued through 1959. The final scheduled overhaul was in 1956. After that, number 4014 logged another 41,000 miles before its last revenue run on July 21, 1959. Official retirement, December 7, 1961. 20 years to the day after Pearl Harbor. Union Pacific donated it to a museum in Pomona, California, where it sat on static display for 52 years. In 2013, Union Pacific reacquired it. The 5-year restoration in Cheyenne was not cosmetic. The boiler was disassembled and rebuilt from the shell inward. Fuel conversion from coal, 56,000 pounds per run at original specification, to number 5, fuel oil required a complete redesign of the combustion system. Thousands of machine parts that had not moved since the Eisenhower administration were replaced to original tolerances or fabricated from scratch. Estimated cost, $50 million. On May 4, 2019, number 4014 rolled out of the Cheyenne shop under its own power for the first time in 58 years. Every tour since has stayed in the territory where it worked: Wyoming, Utah, Nebraska, and Colorado. The 2026 Coast to Coast tour is the first time number 4014 has crossed the Mississippi River under steam since Alco shipped it west in December 1941. Indiana, Ohio, Pennsylvania, and New York, states it had never entered under power, are on the schedule. Number 4014 ran 1,031,205 total miles during its working life without once returning east of the Mississippi. A machine built in 1941 in Schenectady shipped west that December and never back, arriving in 2026 at a building built in 1894 for this class of machine. The station that opened for steam, the locomotive that never came back until now. Which piece of that gap surprises you more? The 85 years since 4014 was built here and went west, or the 48 years that building sat without steam? Drop it in the comments. Now the logistics. The display runs from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. on July 19th. Free admission. No tickets, no reservations required. The address is 1820 Market Street, St. Louis, Missouri. The Union Station parking structure on 20th Street is the closest covered option. Arrive before 9 a.m. Every display stop on this tour has run heaviest from mid-morning through early afternoon. The window before opening gives you the best unobstructed access to the full length of the machine. Number 4014 is 132 feet long. Walking from the pilot, the lead truck at the very front, to the back of the tender takes longer than the number suggests, because scale does not register from a photograph. It registers when you are standing next to 1.2 million pounds from 25 feet. That 25-foot distance is the minimum safe margin at all stops, including display days. A steam locomotive in preparation for departure vents. Live steam from the cylinder cocks during startup and initial movement. The 25-foot line is the functional margin. Stay behind it. Drones are prohibited at every stop on this tour. Check the Union Pacific Steam tracking page at yoop.com the morning of your visit. It shows current locomotive position in real time once the machine is underway. The listed schedule times are arrival targets, not guarantees. Build 30 minutes of buffer if you are traveling more than 90 minutes. Now the detail that changes the overnight calculation. Big Boy departs Union Station at 9:30 a.m. on July 20th. This is not a managed viewing event, no ticketed platform, no barrier perimeter, no crowd control structure. A 1.2 million pound steam locomotive clearing a 19th century train shed under full operating pressure, 300 pounds per square inch at the boiler, with all 4 cylinders loading simultaneously, produces a physical experience that no static display replicates. The building amplifies it. The arch Pegram built overhead. The 230-foot clock tower above the entrance behind you. The shed that was designed to receive and release 32 trains at once, releasing one. The exhaust note from a big boy at operating pressure, 300 pounds per square inch driving 4 cylinders simultaneously, is audible from a distance before the machine is visible. When it clears the shed and reaches Market Street, the sound off the building carries further than anything else on this tour. Market Street, between the station entrance and the clock tower, is public right-of-way. Position yourself there by 9 a.m. on July 20th. After St. Louis, number 4014 makes whistle stops in Pacific, Herman, and California, Missouri before arriving at Kansas City Union Station on July 22nd. After Kansas City, it crosses Kansas toward Denver and returns to Cheyenne. Union Pacific has announced no second Eastern tour. This is the run. When number 4014 crosses the Mississippi River heading west in late July, the 2026 Eastern tour ends. The last passenger train cleared St. Louis Union Station at 11:38 p.m. on October 31st, 1978. The building opened in 1894 for steam locomotives. It closed for steam in 1978. On July 19th, steam returns at 9 in the morning and leaves at 9:30 the next day. Subscribe to American Ironworks for every remaining stop on this tour as it happens. The full return schedule with dates, addresses, and times is in the description. Find your stop and be there.